Okay, so I want you to imagine something for a second.
Mm-hmm.
You're a small business owner.
Right.
You've got a solid business plan. You've secured what's basically venture capital from your local duke and a bishop. You load up 2 ships,
All in.
all in,
Yeah.
and you set off on what's supposed to be a standard business trip down the river, a route people take all the time. But then just the absolute worst case scenario hits.
And not just a little bad luck.
No, you don't just lose the cargo, you lose the ships. You get robbed, you get stranded, and you're actually blocked from going home. You lose your calendar, so you don't even know what day it is. You almost lose your religion.
And to survive, you end up walking across a continent you barely even knew existed. It sounds like the plot of a survival thriller.
It really does. Or maybe a nightmare for a supply chain manager.
Yeah.
But this is the actual documented reality of a man named Afanasy Nikitin.
And that's what we're talking about today.
We are doing a deep dive into a text that is, well, it's honestly one of the strangest and most compelling travelogues I've ever read. It's called The Journey Beyond 3 Seas. And what strikes me right away is that this isn't your typical explorer's log. This isn't Marco Polo bragging about dining with the Great Khan, and it's definitely not some colonial mission like Vasco da Gama.
Well, that is the critical distinction we have to make right away. Nikitin was a merchant from Tver, a city northwest of Moscow. He left home in the 1460s.
So decades before da Gama even sailed around Africa.
Decades. But unlike da Gama, Nikitin didn't show up with a fleet of warships, heavy artillery, or a royal decree. He arrived alone, broke, and completely bewildered.
And that's why we're looking at this. It's the world of the 15th century seen not from a palace, but from the ground. It's a view of India and Persia through the eyes of a guy who was hungry, scared, and honestly, just trying to figure out how to get home.
Without being forcibly converted or starved to death.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this accidental odyssey. It all starts on the Volga River. What was the original plan here?
The plan was incredibly mundane. He was heading down the Volga to trade in Shirvan, which is in modern-day Azerbaijan, a standard commercial run.
So sell some furs, buy some spices or silk.
Come back to Trevor, pay off the debts, and make a profit. It was supposed to be a simple round trip.
But the journey beyond 3 seas isn't a ledger of profits. It's basically a catalog of disasters. It seems like the trouble starts almost immediately near Astrakhan.
It does. Right at the river delta where the Volga meets the Caspian Sea. This is where the accidental part of the Odyssey begins.
Okay.
They were warned that the local Tatars were active in the area, specifically a group led by a guy named Kaisim Sultan. But you have to understand the merchant mindset.
They're on a timeline.
They're operating on credit and time.
Yeah.
They couldn't really turn back without losing everything. So when they tried to slip past the danger zone, one of their ships ran into a fishing weir.
A weir. Just to clarify for everyone, that's like a fence or a trap built in the river to catch fish, right?
Correct. It's a barrier in the water.
So they weren't hit by a cannon, they just snagged on a fish trap.
They get stuck. And while they're immobilized, the Tatars board the ship. The second ship runs aground nearby. And the text is just brutal in its brevity here. Nikitin writes that they were released naked.
And we need to pause on that word, naked. He uses it a lot. Is he talking about literal nudity here?
In this context, naked usually means stripped of all possessions. They took the goods, the supplies, the money. They were left with literally just the clothes on their backs.
Wow.
But the real kicker is what happens next. When they tried to go back upriver to Russia, to safety, they were refused entry.
That seems backwards. You've just been robbed. Why wouldn't you go home and regroup?
Think about the economics of it. The 15th century trade. You've been entrusted with goods on credit. You have investors, powerful people like the Grand Prince.
So if you go back now,
You're returning in debt and in disgrace. In the merchant code of that time, there is no Chapter 11 bankruptcy. You don't just start over. You face debtor's prison or just total social ruin.
the only way out was through.
The only way was forward. He had to keep moving, hoping to find some trade, any trade, that would let him recoup his losses.
So this whole incredible journey is driven not by wanderlust, but by a desperate attempt to stay solvent.
Exactly.
So he crosses the first sea, the Caspian, and ends up in Persia. And reading his notes on this part of the trip, you really get a sense of how alien the landscape felt. He talks about Baku, and he mentions the inextinguishable fire.
Yeah, he's seeing the natural gas and oil fires of the Absheron Peninsula. For a medieval Russian who's used to wood fires and deep snow, seeing fire burning directly out of the ground.
It must have looked like magic.
Or maybe the gates of hell. It just sets the tone for the rest of the trip. He's entering a world that completely defies his understanding of nature.
And this theme of heat really starts to dominate, doesn't it? He
Uh-huh.
travels overland across Persia and eventually gets to Hormuz on the Persian Gulf. And his review of Hormuz is, well, if you hate humidity, you can relate.
He writes that the sun is so hot it burns the man. Hormuz was this massive trade hub, a huge melting pot. But Nikitin is just miserable. He stays there a month just waiting to cross the second sea, the Indian Ocean.
And this is where he makes a business decision that, on the surface, seems just baffling. He buys a horse
A stallion.
in the middle of a desert trade hub. He's broke, remember. He scrapes together what little he has left.
He buys a stallion and drags this poor animal onto a ship to sail to India.
I want to get to the logic of the horse in a minute because it really drives the plot later. But first, that sea voyage, it's not a luxury cruise.
Not at all. It took 6 weeks to cross the Indian Ocean. He describes the ship vividly. It's not built with nails, but stitched together with ropes and coconut fiber.
Stitched together.
Yeah. For a Russian used to river barges, being on the open ocean in a stitched-together boat for 6 weeks, it must have been terrifying. He actually thought he was going to die right then and there.
He finally lands at a place called Chal, south of modern Mumbai. And if he thought the gas fires in Baku were strange, India completely breaks his brain. This is the real culture shock.
Oh, absolutely. You have to remember, Nikitin is from Tuver, cold, forested, Orthodox Christian, very covered up. He lands in India, and the first thing he obsessively notes, and he mentions it constantly, is the nakedness.
Everyone goes about naked, he says.
He's seeing men in loincloths, probably bare-chested. To his medieval Russian sensibilities, that's naked. He notes that the head is uncovered, the chest is bare, and he also immediately notes the racial difference.
Right. Everyone is black and I am white.
He becomes a spectacle himself. He writes, "Wherever I go, many people follow me, marveling at the white person."
So he is the anomaly.
He's the other, and he's observing everything with this mix of fascination and, well, horror. He notes the women, the gender norms, how they drape their fota or cloth, but he's also noticing the social mechanics.
The segregation hits him hard, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
He's very observant about who eats with whom.
Very. He realizes quickly that people don't eat with him. They hide their food from bezirmen, his term for Muslims, and they certainly won't eat with a Christian. He notes they eat only with their right hand, they don't drink wine, they don't eat meat.
For a Russian merchant whose culture revolves around bread, meat, and alcohol, this is a completely upside-down world.
He is totally isolated, socially.
Okay, let's loop back to that horse. He brought this stallion all the way from Persia, hoping to sell it for a huge profit. Was this actually a smart move?
In principle, yes, it was a sound economic theory. Horses just don't breed well in the Indian climate and soil. They tended to die or become infertile.
So war horses were a major luxury import.
A huge import item from Arabia and Persia. If he could sell this one horse to a local noble, he could potentially make back everything he lost.
But instead of a payday, the horse almost gets him killed. This leads to the incident in the city of Junar. This part of the journal, it reads like a thriller.
It's a classic extortion racket. The local ruler, the Khan, sees this foreigner with a nice horse and decides to squeeze him. He confiscates the stallion.
But he doesn't just want the horse.
No. He sees Nikitin is a Ruzin, a Russian, and not a Muslim, so he issues an ultimatum. Convert to Islam within 4 days, or I keep the horse, take 1,000 gold pieces ransom, and take your head.
Wow. Convert or die. And he is completely alone. No ambassador to call, no consulate.
And he's terrified. The journal here becomes very intimate. He writes about the days passing. It happens to be during a fast, the fast of the Assumption. But he doesn't even know the exact dates anymore. He's just praying, begging God for a way out.
This is a man pushed to his absolute limit. How does he get out of it?
It's a human miracle, not a divine one. A Khorasani, a Muslim acquaintance from Persia, steps in. We don't know why he decided to help this random Russian, but on the eve of the deadline, this man intervenes with the Khan.
And he gets his horse back.
He gets his horse back and isn't forced to convert.
That is a massive relief. But you mentioned something interesting there, that he didn't know the dates. This keeps coming up in the text. He's losing track of time.
This is the psychological toll of the journey. In the medieval world, your identity was tied to the liturgical calendar. When is Easter? When is Christmas? When do you fast?
If you don't know, you're endangering your soul.
Exactly. Nikitin has no books. He has no calendar. He writes with such distress, I have forgotten the Christian faith. I don't know when Easter is.
And this is where it gets really fascinating and honestly a bit heartbreaking. He starts using the Muslim calendar to orient himself.
He has no other choice. He starts fasting when the Muslims fast, just to maintain some sort of discipline. And if you look closely at the text of his prayers in the journal, they start to change.
How so?
He prays in Russian, but then he slips into Turkic and Arabic phrases. He calls God Olo, which is Allah, and Karim, the generous. He says, Olo Akbar, Olo Karim.
So it's almost like linguistic osmosis. He's fighting to stay Christian, but his very language is becoming Muslim.
Precisely. It's a desperate struggle to maintain his identity while his environment is totally consuming him. He's asking God to save him, but he's using the names for God that the people around him use.
It just shows how permeable our identity can be when we're completely isolated.
He's holding on by a thread, and that thread is woven from the culture he's trying to resist.
And while all this is going on inside him, he's traveling deeper into the Bahmani Sultanate, to the capital, Bidar. And if he felt broke and naked before, what he sees in Bidar must have made him feel even smaller.
Oh, the wealth inequality he describes is staggering. He talks about nobles being carried on silver beds, wearing gold armor, and then he looks at the countryside and just writes, the rural people are very poor.
He sees the extreme stratification of the society, but the spectacle of the Sultan is what really gets him.
The war elephants.
Yes, I loved his description of the elephants. It's not just, oh, big animals. He describes them like military hardware.
It's cinematic. He describes these massive beasts carrying howdahs armored boxes with men inside. But the detail that stands out is the weaponry. He says huge swords, weighing over 100 pounds, are attached to the elephants' trunks.
Can you just imagine seeing that for the first time? It's like a tank made of meat with a sword on its face.
And clad in steel armor. The Sultan goes out with 300,000 troops, followed by dancers, singers, and, this is a great detail, monkeys and cheetahs trained for hunting.
It's a display of power designed to overwhelm.
And it certainly overwhelmed Nikitin. It just reinforced that he was a nobody in a land of giants.
Amid all this Muslim administration, Nikitin also encounters the Hindu population, and he enters a place he calls the Bhatkana.
Yes, he travels to Parvat, a major Hindu pilgrimage site. He calls it the Jerusalem of the locals. But Kana basically just means idol house.
So he's sort of inventing a vocabulary.
He has to. Nikitin is one of the very first Russians to describe Hinduism, and you can see him struggling. He doesn't have the words for avatar or deity.
He just describes what he sees. He says the idol, the butt, is carved from black stone and looks like a man but has an elephant's nose.
He's seeing Ganesha, and he sees another with a monkey's face, Hanuman. But to him, they're just but. He describes the rituals, thousands of people gathering, shaving their heads and beards as an offering.
He even mentions that the butt is naked, with just a cloth around its bottom depicting the monkey tail. It seems like he's obsessed with the nudity, whether it's people or statues.
It goes back to those cultural taboos we talked about. But, curiously, he connects with the locals here. He tells some Indians that he's not a Muslim, but a Christian.
And how did they react?
He says they didn't hide from him after that. They let him see their food preparation and their prayers. He found this strange solidarity with the Hindus because they were both not Muslim in a Muslim-ruled state.
A momentary connection in a sea of isolation. So he spends years in India. He survives the threats, he observes the elephants, he visits the temples. But eventually he has to make a call. The mission, if there ever was one, was trade. What's the final verdict?
Total failure.
That seems harsh. He found nothing.
He is brutal in his assessment. He writes, I've been deceived by the dogs of Muslims. He says they told him there were goods for Russia, but he found nothing. Everything is for the Muslim lands.
I see.
Pepper and dye are cheap, sure, but the duties to get them out are high, and the sea is full of pirates. He realizes there's no profit to be made for a merchant with his limited resources.
So after years of this, he's got no money, no goods, and he's spiritually exhausted. He decides to head home. But even the return trip is a disaster.
It's the odyssey that never gives him a break. He tries to sail back via the Red Sea, but the wind blows him off course to Ethiopia.
And in Ethiopia, he almost gets robbed again.
Yes. They have to give away what little rice, pepper, and bread they have just to avoid being taken captive. It's one indignity after another. Then he travels to Muscat, treks back across Persia, which is in the middle of a war, by the way, and finally reaches the third sea, the Black Sea.
He arrives in Kaffa, which is modern-day Feodosia in Crimea. And this is where the journal ends. It's not a big homecoming parade.
No, it ends on a somber, reflective note. He's made it to a familiar port, but he is empty-handed. He writes, I have brought nothing with me, no books, no goods. All he has are his notes.
And his prayers. The final entry is this incredible mix of languages again. He says, God is one, the King of glory, Olo, Olo Karim, Olo Rahim.
That is the sound of a man who's been permanently altered. He's back on the edge of the Christian world, physically safe, but his internal monologue has changed. He can't purely speak Russian anymore when he speaks to God.
The East has imprinted itself on his soul.
It's a poignant testament to how travel changes us, whether we want it to or not.
So what does this all mean for us? Why should we care about a failed merchant from the 1470s?
Because usually, history is written by the conquerors. We read the memoirs of successful admirals and wealthy ambassadors. Nikitin gives us the view from the ground. This is history written by the vulnerable.
He shows us what the 15th century world looked like when you had no power, no protection, and no safety net.
Right, it's a story of resilience. He didn't conquer India, he survived it. And he preserved a picture of India that is raw and unfiltered. He noticed the poverty alongside the wealth. He noticed the humanity of the other, even while he feared them.
And he left us this document. Which brings us to a final thought. Nikitin beat himself up for coming back with no profit. He thought he had failed everyone.
But if he hadn't written this journal, maybe just to keep his own sanity, to track the days, to remember who he was, he would have just been another missing person statistic.
That's a good point. If he had succeeded, if he'd bought a bunch of pepper and sold it for a fortune, he probably never would have written The Journey Beyond Three Seas. He'd have just been a rich, quiet merchant who died in obscurity.
That's the irony, isn't it? His failure was his legacy. The writing was the only profit he brought back, and it turned out to be more valuable than a ship full of spices.
A good reminder that sometimes the detour, even the disastrous one, is the real destination. Thanks for taking this journey with us.
A pleasure.
And to you listening, next time your travel plans go wrong, just remember Afanasy Nikitin. At least you don't have to carry a horse across the ocean. See you next time on The Deep Dive.